Welcome to the continuation of Step 0, which is called Step 0 Part 2 of the development of the flagship game. We are still working on the stub of the application, which is something which is just preliminary because the specifications have not been disclosed yet. But now we are playing with layouts and graphics in order to make our stub application look a little better than the previous version that was just meant to provide some basic functionalities without any kind of graphic user interface, just a couple of buttons to be pressed. We resume the development of our application, and focusing on the second screen, which is called gameplay, we try to change a little bit the layout in order not to have the text appear at the right top corner, but a little bit in the middle, and to have also the two buttons, join and share, to appear at the bottom of the screen at the two sides, left and right, respectively. Moreover, I want the background of this screen to be of the same color as the default color used for all CodeWeek events. This is this light blue. And I want also the writing on top of it to be white, and possibly the borders of the button to disappear and to leave just the two words, join and share, which are sensitive to the click of the mouse. So let's start from the background. In order to change the color of the background, I can play with this and choose among these options that are already offered here, but those are just standard options, and no one of the colors proposed is exactly the same that I need. In order to specify exactly the color that I need, I can go into gameplay, which represents the screen, and choose the appropriate block, which is this one, set gameplay background color, and place it here in order to have the background color changed as soon as the gameplay screen is initialized. Then I need to specify a color. I go into the proper panel where I find standard color and also the possibility of specifying any color by means of its three components, red, green, and blue. This is what I'm doing because I need a custom color, and however, I need to find out which are the three components of the color that I want to make. To this purpose, I use an image manipulation program, the GNU image manipulation program, GMP, which is an open source tool, which allows me to take an image and also to build images or to manipulate them. But in this case, I use it just to find out which are the components of this color that I want to make. So I take this tool, which is the one that allows me to specify a color, and this one allows me to pick an existing color. If I take it and click here, you see that the selected color is exactly the same as the one in which I clicked, and most important, here I find the three values of the three components that I need, which are 68, 137, and 202. And those are the numbers that I need to write into my color. Okay, now the color is made. Let's go back to the designer and see how to change the layout. There is a specific panel to this purpose, which is called the layout. And first of all, I use the vertical arrangement to specify that I want my components to be placed in different positions that I want to choose on the vertical axis. Then within this vertical component, I can drag and drop the component that I already had, which are these ones. But in this way, I does not obtain anything which looks different from the original version. But having this layout component, I can specify the size of this component, and for instance, I can specify that it has to fit the parent window, which is the entire screen, both in the horizontal axis and in the vertical axis. And then I can specify that I want all the elements within this vertical arrangement to be centered, and this is the effect. But I cannot do anything to place them vertically unless I choose a center here as well. And let's see what happens by building the application. And here is the effect. It's a little better than it was before, but I want to add some margins here, and I want to place these two buttons at the very bottom of the image and possibly put them on the two sides of the screen, left and right. To this purpose, I need to go back to the layout element and to add an horizontal arrangement element which is placed within the vertical arrangement one. And I move the two buttons within this element, and as you can see, the two are placed horizontally rather than vertically this time. Then I can also specify that I want this element to fit the parent horizontally, and to this purpose I need to select it and to specify fill parent as a width. But what I cannot do is to have one at the left and the other to the right of the screen, because I can either specify left or center or right. I cannot take separate decisions for the two in terms of alignment. So what I do instead is going back to the user interface, taking a label and placing this label between the two without any text. Now the label actually disappears, but I can ask the label to fill the parent horizontally. This means that the label will fill all the space left by the other components which are placed within the same arrangement. So the effect is that the two elements join and share, the two buttons join and share, appear at the two sides of the screen. Now, in order to have some margin, I can specify the overall vertical arrangement, which is the most external container of the component that we are trying to organize. Instead of filling entirely the width of the parent, just occupy, for instance, 90% of it. I cannot specify it directly from here, but I can go into the block editor and find the proper instruction which allows us to set the width of the vertical arrangement. So I go here and add this instruction to the ones that have to be executed when the gameplay screen is initialized. And now I have to specify 90% of the width. So let's first of all find the width. The width is a property of the screen, so I use this one, which is the width, gameplay width. If I do it this way, then I obtain the same result as the fill parent instruction. But I need to specify that I want the width to be just 90% of it. So I need to do some computation, and in particular I use this one, which allows me to multiply the width of the screen by a constant which is 0.9. In this case, the width of the vertical arrangement will be just 90% of the width of the entire screen. Let's look at the effect. As you can see, we achieved two results, in particular the margin and the idea of having the two buttons, one at the left and the other to the right of the screen, but there are still some issues. In particular, the text is not centered, and these two are not displayed at the very bottom of the screen, but right below the writing. So let's work on it. First, let's look why this is not centered. And the reason is that, going back to the designer, if we go on gameplay, we find that the horizontal alignment is left. If we put center here, the first issue is solved. Then we need to move this horizontal arrangement well below the position in which it appears right now. And to this purpose, we need to put some space between the text and these two buttons. And once again, we could, for instance, use a label. We can use an empty label placed here. And this time, we can ask the label to fit the parent vertically. And in this case, the label that is not properly displayed here in the preview will try to expand the region in which it will be possibly displayed in order to occupy all the screen which is not yet occupied by any other component. Let's see the effect by building the application. And here is the effect. It's much better, but we still need some margin on top and at the bottom of the screen. And also we need to change the color of the text if we want it to be white. And we want also the borders of the buttons to disappear and to leave just the two text, join and share, to be clicked. Adding vertical margins is fairly easy because we can work on the vertical arrangement and do from its vertical size exactly what we did for its horizontal size. So going back to the block editor, we can duplicate this instruction and change it a little bit by changing width and using instead high, and we will do the same here by choosing the height of the vertical arrangement to be 90% of the height of gameplay, which is the entire screen. As for the text, we can either specify the color to be used for the labels as an instruction, exactly as we did with the background color. So I can go here, for instance, and take label 1, which is the only true label. The other ones are just used for adding some spaces, and I can set the text color of this label to white. White is a standard color, so I can directly take it from here and put it here. Let's look at the effect. The text is white. There is some margin, but the margin is all at the bottom. This is because we didn't specify to center it vertically. So let's go back here and then go to the designer and specify center also for the vertical alignment. And in this case, the vertical arrangement will be placed in the middle of the screen rather than at the top. Now we have to change the color and the background and the border of the buttons. So we have the two buttons here. We can decide to change the color to white. We can do it for the other button. And also we can decide to remove the background. Just by specifying that we don't want any background. Okay, let's look at the effect again. Now the effect is exactly what I had in mind. Notice that these two are still buttons, even if they look exactly as the rest of the text. In fact, if I press join, the web page appears, and if I press share, the sharing options are displayed. Now we can look at the first screen and try to make it more coherent with the rest of the application and with the look and feel of the CodeWeek. Okay, screen 1 contains just a button. I want this button to appear here instead of the place where it is right now. And I want also some graphics to appear here. And finally, I want to change the background color of this screen as well in order to use the default color of CodeWeek. First of all, I go and I specify that I want the horizontal alignment of the screen to be centered. In this way, play the game appears at the center. Then I change also the background color to some light blue, just to allow me to see the effect of the white writings that I will put on it, even if the exact color will be specified in the code. Then I need to move this button here. And to this purpose, instead of placing some labels or some other placeholders, I use a canvas, which is a drawing surface, a surface where I can put some graphics. So I take a canvas and I drag and drop it here. And I ask this canvas to fit entirely the width of the screen, so fill parent option, and also for the vertical alignment, for the vertical size, I ask it to fill the parent. And this is the effect, which is not apparent. In particular, the vertical option of fill parent is not properly displayed here. But let's look at the effect obtained in the application when we build it. As you can see, the button has been moved at the bottom. The background color of the screen has become light blue, not the CodeWeek one, but just the one that we specified on the design editor. And then we have the canvas that occupies all the vertical space left by the button, but the background color of the canvas is not the same as the screen, because the canvas has its own background color, which is not transparent. So we can make it transparent by specifying none. And then we have to change the background color of the screen exactly as we did before. Now I want to add some graphic element into the canvas, and the graphic element that I want to use are the one called image sprite. I want to use two image sprites, and I drag them and drop them within the canvas in any place. First of all, we need to associate an image with a sprite. And the image that I want to associate with sprite 1 is an image that I previously prepared using a new image manipulation program, which is this one, just CodeWeek. So this is called CodeEU 0, and I need to associate it with a sprite by doing, first of all, this, which is uploading the file. And once the file has been uploaded, I can associate it with the sprite. I go into the picture menu and I select the file that I previously uploaded on the AppInventor server. And here is the effect. The image appears here. Then I need also to associate an image to the second sprite, and to do so, I directly specify the name into the Picture tab by uploading it directly. And the file that I want to associate is this one, which has been also prepared using the same tool, and it's this one, which represents the EU, which looks like a mouse. Okay, now I have both sprites with an image associated with them, and I need to place them into the screen. To decide where to place the sprites, I can move them around, and by doing so I will affect the X and Y coordinates in this tab. Otherwise, I can specify directly the coordinates manually and have the sprite move accordingly. For the second sprite, I specify coordinates that I previously determined, because it is quite hard to specify them directly by looking at the screen, because it is not trustworthy in terms of exact position of the graphic elements on the screen. So you need to test it on your companion app or build the application and test it on your emulator or on your device, as we are going to do right now. And this is how our application looks like right now. Now, what I want to achieve here is the same transparent effect that we used in the other screen, in order to leave just the writing in place of a button. And then I want also to make some animation here. Let's go back to AppInventor. So for the button, we change the color to white, and we remove the background color, and that's it. As for the animation, we need to deal with time, and to this purpose we add another interface element which is called clock, which is a non-visible element, and then we need to do some coding, and we go back to the code editor or to block editor in order to specify which kind of animation we want to achieve. And the effect that I want to implement is fairly easy, given that the application that we have shows the EU domain represented like a mouse. I want the mouse to move the tail if we click on it. So this is the effect that I want to achieve. And to make this effect, I use two different versions of this sprite. One is this one, and the other one is the same drawing with the tail on this side. This second version has been prepared in GIMP, and this is the second image. And I can specify my sprite to take a different image based on the code that I'm going to write. As for the animation, we need to use a clock to have the notion of time, and then we go to the block editor in order to specify which kind of animation we want. The animation that we want is pretty easy. Given that we have the EU domain represented as a mouse, I want this mouse to move the tail if we click on it, and then stop moving the tail if we click again on it. In order to achieve this effect, I can decide, based on time, to switch the sprite from this version of the image and another one which has been prepared with a different name. The other image is this one. As you can see, the tail appears on the other side, and we can use it as an alternative to the image already loaded for the sprite. This is called CodeWeek mouse 2R, and I can upload it into AppInventor in order to be ready to switch to this image when I want to achieve this effect. So going back to the designer, I upload this other image, the second version of the mouse, and then in the clock I specify that I want the clock to be enabled and the time interval to be of 100 milliseconds. This means that clock ticks will be separated by 100 milliseconds. This means that there will be 10 ticks per second. For the clock, we specify that we don't want it to be enabled when the application starts, and as a timer interval we specified 100 milliseconds, meaning that there will be a clock firing every 100 milliseconds or 10 times per second. Moving to the block editor, we have, of course, new clock-specific instructions, and we have to choose among them in order to make the clock fire, to enable the clock, and to use the clock to move the tail of our mouse. But first of all, let's look at the event that triggers the movement of the tail. We want the tail to move when the mouse is touched. If we click on the sprite, image sprite 2, which is the one representing the mouse, we find many different situations represented here. And we can choose, for instance, this one, which represents the touch of the screen on top of the sprite. When this happens, we want our mouse to start moving the tail or to stop moving the tail if it was already moving it. So in order to distinguish between the two situations, we need to take track of the actual status. To this purpose, we make use of a variable which is called phase and is initialized to 0. Here is the initialization of the phase variable. And then when we touch the mouse, we use a control instruction which is if then, and we say that if the phase is 0, then something has to happen, otherwise something else has to happen. And otherwise is this else option. The condition can be specified in this way. We can go here and use this comparison between the current value of the phase variable and constant 0 to decide whether we are in phase 0 or not. If we are in phase 0, what we want to do is to start moving the tail. And to this purpose, we do exactly this. We start firing the clock, by using the timer enabled instruction and by setting it to the logic value true. So we are saying that if the sprite is touched when the phase is 0, then the timer is enabled. And we need also to change the status by setting the phase variable to a different value, for instance 1. So next time the mouse will be touched, then the global phase will be 1. This means that this condition will not be satisfied and the code to be executed will be this one, the else option. And what we want to happen in this second case is to set the timer enabled to false, which means stop the clock, and reset the global phase to 0. So in this way, the two phases will alternate each time we click on the mouse. But now we need to associate an action with the firing of the clock, because so far we have just specified that the clock will be enabled and disabled based on the phase and on the click of the mouse. Now, in order to make the tail move, we go into the clock panel and we take this block which represents the situation in which the clock fires. So whenever the clock fires, and it fires only when it is enabled, then at each clock tick we want the image sprite to change in order to represent the tail either to the left or to the right of the mouse. We use a second variable, more or less as we used the phase variable here, and this second variable will be called tail, and it will be used to represent the two positions of the tail or the two images to be associated with the sprite. So initially we call it 1, which is the typical position that the tail has in the CodeWeek logo, and here we use the same construction that we used here, using an if statement with an else option, and the condition this time will be based on the status of variable tail, but we can take this comparison here and adapt it to the new situation by changing the variable and by changing the value. Then we need to switch from a picture to the other, so we go into image sprite 2 and we take this one, which is set image sprite to picture. And here we have to specify the name of the picture that we want to replace the original one. And the name of the picture is this one, CodeEU mouse2r.png, which is the image that we uploaded to the server. Then we need also to update the value of variable tail, and in particular we set it to 2 in order for it to be different from 1 at the next time the clock fires, so that the other option will be used instead. And in these options we will do exactly the same but with a different image, which is image 1, and then we will reset the global tail value to 1. So in this way, the tail keep moving and alternating the two images. So let's look at the effect of what we have done so far. Now there are no animations, but if I click on the mouse, it starts moving the tail, and if I click on it again, it stops. If I click on any other part of the screen, nothing happens, while if I click here again, this is the effect. If I press on play the game, the functionality
You're playing with a game that does not yet exist.
Okay, so this is the application that will be placed on the application store before the disclosure of the actual specification of the FlagShip game. You are warmly invited to play with it and to try to rebuild it following this tutorial. Also, you are invited to make some different animation on the first screen, and for instance, in the version that you will find in the application store, I will add an additional animation just to challenge you. Thank you.